Happy to be here with you on May 19th, the last day of this year's legislative session. We, at the start of this session, came in under very unusual circumstances, prepared to do the work of the people of Minnesota. And I want to say that the Senate has performed admirably this session. We took hard measures at the beginning with power sharing to make sure that we could do the work of the people of Minnesota. And I am feeling a deep frustration this morning with my colleagues in the House. The chaplain this morning said that we should temper our deep frustration and remember the work that we need to do for the people of Minnesota, but my mouth is full of cuss words right now. We are waiting now for work to come over from the Minnesota House of Representatives. For 3 weeks, we negotiated with the administration and with the House in a tie to reach joint targets. Every person in that room committed to doing the work to get this budget processed as swiftly as possible. And we've seen over and over again, particularly the House Republicans, adding new conditions and new ideas when budget bills are about to close. We saw last night higher ed finally reaching a hard-fought agreement, and the chair from the Republican side adding a condition this morning on a convention for regions, not related to the budget, and slowing that down. For 24 hours, the chair of Commerce has had language around reinsurance, a chief priority for the Republicans in this budget deal, and he hasn't even responded to Melissa Wickland in order to get the language together because he's been instructed by Speaker Demuth not to make any more progress on the Commerce bill. We've seen that happen with state and local government, a hard-fought negotiation over that budget bill, and a new addition of language last night around proxy voting that doesn't have anything to do with the budget. Transportation stuck between a chair here in the Minnesota Senate and the chair, Senator or Representative Koznick, adding new conditions and earmarks that don't have any business in this year's transportation bill. Human Services stuck because the House Republicans only want to fund nursing homes at the expense of people with disabilities. We have worked all session long in bipartisan form to try and find a resolution for Minnesotans with this budget. And today we've come in, we have begun our session, and we're going to caucus and recess because the House has not delivered any more work for us to process. It is deeply frustrating. I knew that we were going to held into a special session, and that's okay if we need to finish up our work. But when you reach a conclusion in a negotiation and new conditions are being added that slow down the budget, that's frustrating, and that is getting in the way, and I'm concerned that Republicans are driving us to a special session, and I'm concerned about their commitment to finishing this work for the people of Minnesota.
So it sounds like this whole budget deal, you're saying, is derailed by last-minute additions. Is that fair? I
think it is not derailed, but absolutely slowed down to put us into extra innings and perhaps open up a different negotiation. We need to finish the work.
Is this, in your eyes, the fault of House Republicans, DFLers, both?
Right now, the conditions that are being added are coming from Republican House members.
What does this say for the? I mean, people are going to watch this at home and say, "Well, they had a deal and now they don't." What does this say for just the trust in the institution if there was a deal and now it appears that it's going to be maybe a longer special session?
Well, I think it's going to be we're going to go into special session. I don't think that it is right to say that the deal is coming undone. I think what I'm concerned about is the commitment to finish the work.
But 2 years ago, you used all your political muscle to get stuff that the Republicans thought was out of line, and why wouldn't the Republicans use a similar ability this year to get stuff they want? I don't get what the difference.
2 years ago, we passed a budget and we got done on time.
But was it last year there was the mega omnibus bill? There was a lot of last-minute things, some of which, Republicans accused Democrats of not giving full vetting.
Those bills passed on the last night were all conference committee reports. So they were all vetted through the process. My point is that we have a clear glide path to finishing up this session and finishing up the budget. And I don't understand why new conditions have been added in these last number of days. We're going to finish up the day. We're going to go home. We're going to get a little rest, and I'll be back here tomorrow, ready to get to work to finish this budget. And I just hope my colleagues in the other body have that same spirit and commitment to finishing the work.
Do you think you'll even have enough work to carry you through until midnight? Do you think you'll even have enough work to keep busy until midnight tonight, or are you going to go home early?
We hope that a couple of the bills that we know, state and local government and higher ed, that are ready to close, and there were new conditions added last night, get ironed out so that they can be done. I want to thank our staff, our nonpartisan staff, and the staff in the revisor's office who work now around the clock in order to process bills, and they were here around the clock last night getting ready to process those proposals if we get them buttoned up so we can pass them today. So I don't expect that we're going to be going home anytime early today. I'm just worried that we won't have enough work to process, and we need that information to come over from the House. I do know that while we're here, our members are going to continue to meet in conference committees and continue to pursue as much as they can to get done.
Have you had any conversations with with Republican Minority Leader Johnson about what it would take for his caucus to put up the votes for the Minnesota care rollback for undocumented?
So,
or do you have the votes in your caucus?
Leader Johnson and I have continued to talk about a variety of issues, bonding issues, environmental issues, healthcare issues. We have a good and open line of communication, and that will, I think, really benefit the legislature here in these next couple of weeks.
What about your own caucus? I mean, we heard Senator Seeberger say that she doesn't support the provision. Maybe other members of the Blue Dog Caucus may also not. I mean, do you have the votes?
So I have a path to pass the budget deal that was enacted.
Does that include you being the sole DFL member for it?
You know, I hope that we're able to find the way to move this budget along with our votes. We have 67 votes in the Senate, and we will figure out how to get it in place. We have to pass a budget for the people of Minnesota.
Is Memorial Day enough of a deadline to spur a deal by then?
I hope everybody's thoughts of the cabin and the lake will propel us to get done by Memorial Day weekend.
But you don't think it'll be a one-day special session?
I think the time between now and when a special session is called will determine the length of the special session.
So you don't think you'll necessarily, when you said you'll come back to work tomorrow, you don't necessarily think a special session, you'll be ready for Walz to call a special session tomorrow?
You know, that is a question for the governor. I will be here and ready to work for the Minnesota Senate, for the people of Minnesota.
So there seem to be some other issues too that perhaps there was confusion about, or Democrats maybe have also reopened, like private school fund cuts to private schools is one example, where it really sounded like at the press conference last week that the leader deal was no cuts to non-public schools, and now a member of your caucus is saying, well, that is on the table still.
So
there's some confusion about what's in the deal.
no, I don't think there's confusion from my perspective at all on what is in the deal. I think Speaker Demuth doesn't support that and was speaking on her behalf. That issue will be resolved in the conference committee.
But you're saying it was not agreed to that non-public school aid would be held harmless?
I think Speaker Demuth was speaking her position on that question.
Do you know what was happening in the Minnesota House last night? What conversations they were having while those votes and the roll calls were remaining open for so long?
I don't, but I think that's an example of, you know, the inability right now of the tie to move things along. I think they took 3 similar efforts to take something off the table, deadlock, in their tie, and then close the board. 3 times they did that, where they are pairing together unemployment insurance and permitting reform. Let me tell you that unemployment insurance for the laid-off miners, the steelworkers, is in the Jobs and Labor Conference Committee, and if we want to get that done, we should get back to work in that conference committee. But right now, Representative Dave Baker only seems to want to talk about paid family medical leave at the expense of doing that work.
How do you defend the lack of transparency here at the end?
I get very frustrated with the way the legislature in general has moved away from open and public conference committees. It's something that I have been very vocal about with my colleagues and with the House and with the administration. I think it is important that we're meeting in public. But right now, I think that there are forces that are making that much more difficult. And some of that is about the tie in the House. But I think we are better off, always better off, when the work of the conference committees are happening in public.
Was it your understanding of the deal that the agreement was to not pursue additional changes for paid family leave? Because that's also seemed, like you mentioned, Representative Baker and Speaker Demuth had said twice, it seemed, that there were no other changes in the deal besides the maximum tax cut, but now they also still seem to be saying that just because it's not in the deal doesn't mean it can't still be in play. I mean,
I've seen a number of things that we resolved in the negotiation around joint targets that continue to come up from the House Republicans.
And that's one of them. Like, you think you resolved, your understanding was you walked away from the agreement with an agreement to not make more changes to paid family leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Last week you said this was your most difficult session. That was last week. How are you feeling this morning?
I would say that's right. It is hard. This is always a difficult time of the year. We have to make hard choices. Things that people really hope for aren't going to happen. They're letting that go. That comes with a lot of feelings and a lot of emotion. So we're always, a little overtired. We're disappointed. Those things are normal. But the very, very closely divided legislature, the tie in the House, I think has just really emphasized our differences in a way that makes this much more difficult.
can you share?
This looks like you have 7 out of 20 conference committee bills completed. Is there a prediction you would give us as to how many will be done by the end of the night?
As I mentioned earlier, I think there are at least 2 that I know that were ready to close last night, and then there were new ideas coming from the House Republicans that slowed that down. So we're working hard now to get those finished, state and local government and higher education, so we can get those across the line.
Is there any agreement about the vehicle by which you'd pass the undocumented immigrant in Minnesota Care issue? I know there was maybe discussion about doing a standalone bill or put it in Health and Human Services. What do you think it will end up being?
I think it's got to be a standalone bill.
The biggest parts of the budget, education and human services, the conference committees haven't even met on those. I don't think there's even been a conference committee named for education. What are the timetables for both of those huge bills?
So you will see us, I think, beginning tomorrow, forming working groups. There'll be the conference committees that we know and working groups for taxes and for K-12 education so that work can begin.
Can conference committees work when you're not in a special session?
They will be working groups.
Oh, because they're
Yep,
working groups.
they will be working groups and informal, but yes, they can and they will.
And then once you call them special session, they'll have to actually gather into the conference.
Then we have to, then we have to process the
public
work.
won't be able to watch these working groups debate or anything, will they?
The public will be here and working, and if they're meeting in public, the public can watch, yeah, of course.
You haven't had
Will you
any
commit to them
discussion?
Meeting in public?
Pardon
Will you
me?
commit to asking them to meet in public, so it's not all done behind?
I am very interested in them working in public. I'm just not sure that I can get agreement from the other body.
But you haven't had any discussions with Governor Walz or leaders in the other chamber about what a special session looks like if you would go right into it, wait a few days as the reviser pushes bills, come back at the end of the week, any of that sort of details you don't have?
I don't have those details. I know that our chiefs of staff are working to make sure that we've got an orderly plan, but there haven't been discussions yet.
Do you agree with the framing that we're ahead of 2019's pace?
You know what? It doesn't really matter to me. What I'm focused on with all of my being is to make sure that we come together, get this budget put together, and get it put into law.
All right, folks, gotta end it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There you go. I love the cooperative spirit in the room. That white balance thing was fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
You're good to go.
Well, welcome to the last day of session. This is kind of interesting. You know, usually we're working hard, passing bills off the floor, and as you can see, it's pretty empty here today. We heard a lot of blame. The blame game is starting already. It's unfortunate we're coming to this point where we have to figure out what the bills are going to be looking like. The Democrats in the House took 23 days off at the beginning of the session. That would have been very useful at this point. And so now we're trying to cram that in. Inevitably, we're going to be going to special session. We have a number of bills that need to be closed up that haven't been yet. And so we're going to be processing those, what comes to us today. And then, of course, we're going to roll into special session. And at that point, we're really going to have to figure out what's going on. The House Republicans are doing a great job over there. I know there's been some concern about new conditions or whatever that they've been talking about, but the reality is that in the agreement that those leaders put together, I saw a draft of that in the final details. There is a lot of room for those conference committees to really figure out what the details are going to be in that. And so this isn't anything out of the blue. This isn't a surprise, but they are working on those and trying to work hard and coming to an agreement. I think what you're seeing right now is Democrats' frustration after 2 years and $18 billion of surplus being spent, that they're finally having to realize that there are constraints on Minnesota taxpayers. And we're not an infinite state of money and ability to pay for whatever projects they want to have. And so now where they're actually going to have to balance the budget and reconcile the decisions that are being made, it's getting to be frustrating for their caucus. And you saw a couple days ago, as they tried to break down the governor's door during the press conference, that frustration really bubbling up. But look, we're going to be working hard. We're here available. Senate Republicans are ready to go. We haven't been asked for votes yet, but we are ready to go whenever those opportunities present themselves.
Majority Leader Murphy hasn't had a conversation with you about Republicans putting up votes for the rollback of Minnesota Care for undocumented immigrants?
Senator Murphy and I have a great line of communication, and so when those opportunities present themselves, I'm sure we'll be able to talk about those things going forward.
Do you know how you'll vote when you're asked that question?
What's that?
Do you know how you'll vote on that issue?
On which issue?
Undocumented immigrant health care.
Look, we weren't part of that agreement. We're going to have to look at the language that's presented to us, but we're willing to work on the things that are important to Minnesotans.
Are any of your members introducing last-minute policy changes or line items that are slowing things down?
Oh, so most of our members are ready to engage with Democrats, both in the House and the Senate. And so if there are items that we can get in and help improve, we are there, and we're going to be doing that. Whether it's earned safe and sick time, paid medical leave, there's a plethora of other issues that are going on. The undocumented workers, we see that a lot of money has been going to that, over $200 million to really figure that one out. But they're also cutting nursing homes by almost the same amount. So we're going to make sure that the bills that going forward are going to be bills that really represent the needs of Minnesotans going into this discussion.
There's a lack of trust between leaders right now in the legislature.
Look, I think we've all represent different caucuses, and so trying to figure out how this puzzle fits together is a big chore. And so I would say that the conversations that we've had have been very good and very respectful, and we'll continue to work in that manner.
Was it your understanding of the deal that there would not be changes to paid family medical leave and sick and safe time?
No, what I understand from the deal, and again, we didn't sign off on that, but what I understand on the deal was that conference committees will be doing the work. And so there's opportunities to move within that agreement and make sure that those bills come out in a way that we can have bipartisan compromise. Oh, I have no idea. It just depends on how well those committees in different jurisdictions get along and able to figure out that solution.
Are you getting them?
Do you want a guarantee on that one, or?
No, like a scheduled vacation.
Are you satisfied with the amount of transparency? We heard Senator Pratt last night saying in the legacy bill there was one hearing and that was to sign it.
Minnesotans expect transparency, and I know some committees have the ability to, or have done a little bit more transparent, but I'm hoping that as we roll into special session, that it's very transparent to Minnesotans on what is going on, the positions that are held. That is very, very important. We can't be doing this behind closed doors, and the tendency would be in special session to make the agreement and then move forward. So I'm hoping that we can open up the doors, shine some light on the process, and see what people are saying.
I know you didn't sign the agreement, but another kind of point of conflict over what's actually in it seems to be on the private school funding and whether there was an agreement to not cut aid to non-public schools. What was your understanding of where everyone landed on that?
So again, that was one of those issues that I didn't see within the agreement, so I don't know exactly. I think that's something that was left up to the conference committees themselves to determine on that one as well. But I know the House has House Republicans have a very strong position on that.
Does your caucus share that position?
Yes, we want to make sure that we're protecting non-public.
Does your caucus feel about the agreement as far as, introducing new provisions here on the floor, kind of respecting the confines of that agreement, and maybe, if they're introducing other things, delaying some of that work to get some of your caucus's priorities across the finish?
Look, we're going to show up, Quinn, every day and make sure that we're putting forward our priorities. We're not subject or held to that agreement. We didn't sign the agreement. So we are going to fight to the very end to make sure that our caucus is represented well and our constituents within that. We are going to be fighting to the end to make sure that that happens. Now, the House Republicans are working within the confines of the agreement itself. They're not adding terms that are blowing up the overall global agreement, but trying to figure out a way that they can move forward with the votes in their caucus and in the House Democrat caucus to move those bills over to the Senate.
Just to be clear, are you saying that you don't agree that the House is holding things up? Do you have a different understanding of why things are?
Yeah, I would say that they're working within the agreement and trying to make sure that their caucus is getting their issues pushed forward. So I don't think they're holding things up or not arguing in good faith or discussing these in good faith. I think what they're doing is simply trying to get through the conference committee so they can get the votes from both sides to move it forward and move it over to the Senate.
What's your understanding of what happened on the House floor last night with the repeated votes and the keeping the roll open and the conversations that were apparently happening in regard to things?
Quinn, I'm not real familiar with what happened there, but it sounds like typical day at the House. So.
Can you compare this to 2 years ago?
2 years ago, when the Senate Republicans were in the dark the whole time and got rolled on everything going forward, I think it's actually nice to have half of the state represented again by a tied House and a strong Republican caucus in the Senate. We saw, taxes get raised by $10 billion. We saw $18 billion of surplus being spent that year. And then we also saw a number of huge social issues get pushed through despite the objections, despite the offer of Senate Republicans and House Republicans to work together to figure out solutions. So this year, when we actually have to work together, you see Democrats either not showing up to work or throwing a fit in front of the governor's office. That's not how we do it. We sit down, we get together in these meetings, we try to work things out and put things together. We have to compromise, and that's the name of the game this year. And it seems like there are those who don't want to do that.
The Taxes Committee doesn't even have a conference committee yet. Do you think there's any chance that there might be, after that bill goes through conference, new revenue, new taxes for the people of Minnesota?
Senate Republicans are dead set against raising more taxes. They've already done that, $10 billion over the last 2 years. We do not need new revenue, and we are not committing to any sort of tax increases. That is just off the table for us.
Are you opposed to the cannabis tax increase?
Look, we said no tax increases, and so that applies to everything.
Is no tax bill an option? Of course, you don't need one to continue government.
We don't need them, but again, we're in the minority, so we don't get to control that. So,
right, guys,
thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Love to hear it. You stay about 30 feet.